I work here at One More Page Books. I've worked here for since we opened, so a long time. If any of you know how long it's been here, which is actually, it was probably soon after we opened that I met you at some point, and I met Susan not as an author, but as another book industry person, a bookstore buyer. I don't know if you were a librarian at the time, but you certainly were in spirit a librarian. So I think a lot of you probably know Susan, and so I don't need to do the whole.
Everybody
but perhaps literally everyone here. So I've gotten to know Susan very well as she's had to come sign so many copies of this beautiful, beautiful book. And it was great to, when it first came out, we didn't get to do an event, unfortunately, but we got to, the two of us did an event every time she signed books, and she would tell me all about it, and she would tell me stories of the artist, and the art is so incredible in this book, and so it's amazing now to actually have the co-artist here, word artist, visual artist, here with us, Sean, as well, so maybe you aren't as familiar with Sean. I'll start with my little notes of the bio for Sean. Excuse me, I need to this is actually the book as a cover for my notes that I made for myself, scrawled in my own handwriting. Okay, so Sean's first book was actually an Eisner Award nominee, which is a huge deal. Like, that's amazing. And your first solo picture book came out actually 6 months ago, or no, sorry, but I don't know what time it is, but it was May of 2021. Yeah, some amount of time ago that was semi-recent. This Very Tree, which is so beautiful, also just an incredible book. Your work with nature is just, I love it. I love the cherry blossoms in this book. I love this very tree. Charlottesville and has come all the way to be here with us. And I'm so looking forward to their discussion about creating this masterpiece. I don't know about you, but I cried the first time I read it all the way through. So it's like, it's so amazing when I think you can tell such an intense story in a medium that doesn't allow for length. It's a short book, and it's the intended readership is younger, but to be able to deliver that emotion, I think is just so powerful. So anyway, this isn't a spiel about me loving the book, but I do. Susan obviously does so many things. She's such an incredible part of the book community. I mentioned before, City Valley librarian, bookstore, book buyer, author, just general fantastic person who promotes other authors as well. So we're so thrilled to be able to sell her book and to celebrate here with her. So thank you all so much for being here. And they're going to have a great discussion and then take some audience questions, I believe. And then they'll sign some books. So if there's anyone who still knows someone that they haven't gifted this to yet, now is your chance. So join me in welcoming Sean Rubin and Susan Kusel.
Thank you. I have to start by thanking One More Page. And Leila, who's been this really amazing, and there's my son. Leila has been just amazing. It's been great to come in and talk to someone else who's also a book buyer and about industry stuff, and it's been so amazing and supportive. Since I know literally everyone in this room, you may know I'm a book buyer for a store in New Jersey, and I get asked a lot of times why on earth in New Jersey, and the answer is this store. When this store was opening, they were looking for a buyer, and the hours and everything didn't work out for me. And instead, Eileen, who runs the store, the owner, she gave me a referral to a friend who runs a store in New Jersey and was looking for someone to expand his children's section. And for the last, 12 years or so since this store opened, I've been working for that store in New Jersey thanks to the generosity of this store. So I literally owe my career to them. And they have just been great. There's not a person here person at this bookstore who hasn't been amazing and welcoming. And every time I walk in, they just bend over backwards and help me out. It's just been a delight. And they also are so incredible with everyone in the community, with all my friends who are writers. They do so many events, and they're so generous. So I really appreciate them. And I appreciate all of you here. My parents are here. Sean's parents, Sean's family is here. I have a friend years ago. My friend Lisa is here. Lisa was the leader of my brownie group who I met when I was 5. The Gessels are here. We watched our kids go from kindergarten down to seniors in high school. Our friend Adam is here, who's been our friend for a long time. My brother, family are here. My cousins are here. My niece and nephew are here. So I am really just touched by all of you. You all mean so much to me. And if you're watching on the camera, you mean a lot to me too. And over to you, Sean. Did you introduce?
It's great to be here. Actually, we missed the first event that the store did, the digital event, about a year ago now, because Susan reminded me we were moving. So I'm happy to announce that we moved and it was successful.
Yeah, a friend of mine today said, earlier today, said, wait, is this the event that we were going to have a year and a half ago? And I said, yes, this was the event. So we would have had this event when the book came out, but we didn't have the event because we weren't having events. So so thank you all for coming today, a mere 15 months after the book got published. And then afterwards, we were having a party literally directly across the street at Yellow Bistro to celebrate the book winning a little something from the Signature Purple Award Committee, which was a very big deal to us. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And but so we were glad that we finally celebrated with all of you and had this event that we didn't have quite a bit of time. Oh, and as I was individually thanking people, Rebecca Levitan just walked in, and Rebecca has helped me through this entire book process. Rebecca is the past chair of the Signature Book Award Committee and has been a real cheerleader for me through the entire process. I am continually grateful to her and her wisdom and guidance. Okay, so we actually do the event. Oh, wait! I guess I should read it this time because maybe a few people know me. Okay, The Passover Guest by Susan Kusel, illustrated by Rubin, published by Neil Porter Books, Holiday House. So when I do this with kids, I kind of am obsessive about showing them all the parts of the book. This is what comes from me being on the Caldecott committee. And I always show this case cover, and Sean did the most magnificent job of the case cover. Yeah.
I was trying to get that illustration in the book and it never quite fit. So then it was going to be the end papers, and it was like, no. And so then it's like, okay, it's the case cover. Like, Sean, this book's already late. if that's not on my desk by tomorrow, it's not the case cover.
And then we went back and forth about, since Denise is here, went back and forth about the mandel bread, which Sean insisted was mandel bread and not regular bread, and that it was kosher for Passover. So just for me, he added the nuts there, so that it's really mandel bread and not actual bread. And fortunately, no critics pointed out that there was bread on the plate. So we're good. And then last Passover, Denise made me mandel bread. Sean's mom, Denise, made me mandel bread as a gift to show me her mandel bread, and it was. And then these are the end papers. We were just talking this week about the different end papers that were possibilities. But I really love these cherry blossoms. So the cherry blossoms, I guess now's the many time to talk about it. The cherry blossoms are so important to me. I wanted this book to be in DC we'll talk about that in a minute, but to me the cherry blossoms are DC, right? They're so crucial. Wait. This is a fun event. The cherry blossoms are DC, and so Sean just did a stunning job of the cherry blossoms, and then he added this blue cat, which of course you see every day when you go see the church. And the book is adapted from an I.L. Parrott story. Parrott's was called Father of Literature, and it's the original title is Der Kunstmacher, which translates roughly to the magician. It's really weird to read in front of all of you. It's like a little bit of pressure. Muriel loved Washington in the springtime. The white buildings stood out crisply against the green lawns. The cherry trees burst into pink blossoms at the tidal basin. She could feel Passover in the air. The year 1933 was different. Her father, like so many others, had lost his job. Her family didn't have enough to eat even on ordinary days. It would be impossible to buy all the food needed for their Passover Seder. They didn't even have enough wine to fill the ceremonial cup for their prophet Elijah, who was said to visit every Passover Seder. So there was no need to rush home to prepare the holiday feast. Muriel walked slowly from the park and stopped to look up at Lincoln on his magnificent marble chair. A strange figure dressed in rags, struggling on the steps of the monument, caught her eye. He looked as threadbare as the men on the street waiting in line for soup. My husband is looking at me like really serious, like, what's going to happen next? As he watched, his brown hair turned red. The eggs he juggled became blazing candles. His shabby clothes turned into those of the finest silk. Muriel was amazed. She took her only penny and put it in the hat at the man's feet. He smiled at her. The sun is setting. Passover is about to start. You don't want to miss your Seder. My family isn't having one this year, Muriel answered. Are you sure? Asked the man. Perhaps you'd better hurry home. He sounded so confident that Muriel started walking quicker than she ever had before. She ignored the Washington Monument gleaming in the fading sunlight. She brushed past the White House without a second glance. Gradually, the stately buildings began to recede. When she got to her neighborhood, her stomach rumbled as she smelled the delicious food from other Seders. Celebrations were smaller this year, but you could still see tables filled with food and windows shining with light. What could the man have meant? How could they have a feast without any food? Her feet went faster and faster. When she arrived home, she opened the door in anticipation, but she only saw the same shabby room with the spindly chairs and rickety table that had always been there. Her parents emerged from the shadows, dressed in their best clothes for the holiday, even though there was no food on the table, no gleaming silverware, no wine to the side for Elijah. Every door will be open to us on Passover, said her father. Let us find another home where we can celebrate. Page turn problems. Oh, Alex, hi. Sorry. As Muriel reached for the door handle, there was a knock. When she opened it, she saw the mysterious stranger standing there. May I join your Seder? He asked. You are welcome to share anything we have, answered Muriel's father, but this year we have nothing. I have everything we need, said the man. Muriel turned and looked again at the room. It was no longer shabby, but glowing with light from countless candles. The chairs were piled with comfortable pillows. And the food! There were mountains of tender brisket, oceans of flavorful soup, and fields of crunchy matzah. A magnificent Seder plate lay in the center of the table, complete with an egg, a shank bone, horseradish, parsley, lettuce, and roses. There was even a beautiful cup of wine for Elijah. Muriel hadn't realized she was hungry, but now she wanted to eat everything, even the horseradish. Muriel and her parents couldn't believe their eyes. After seeing so little food for so long, their house was now bursting with it. Can this really be? Her mother asked. How is this possible? Her father asked. He sounded nervous. Everything is possible on Passover, answered the man. Muriel could tell her parents were uneasy. She volunteered to ask the rabbi if they could proceed with this astonishing meal. She ran to the synagogue and found the rabbi about to start his own Seder. She told him about the mysterious guest and how a magnificent feast had appeared from nowhere. If you can pour the wine and break the matzah, and what you have described is a true miracle, said the rabbi. Can you show me your Seder? Muriel led the way, and the rabbi's curious guests followed. More people joined the procession as it passed other Seders. When they reached Muriel's house, the crowd was enormous, but the stranger was no longer there. Everyone crowded into the tiny house. They all managed to fit inside as the rabbi examined the table. They watched as the wine poured itself, and then the middle matzah broke in two and became the afikomen the children would look for later. The rabbi picked up a piece of matzah, crumbled it in his hand, and then blessed the meal. This is not an illusion, he said, but a Passover miracle. We may all enjoy this beautiful feast. There were enough chairs for all, their own seders forgotten. The guests joined Muriel's family in their retelling of the story of Passover. They dipped their parsley in salt water and ate bitter herbs. We did that already. Muriel asked the 4 questions about Passover. All the children searched for the piece of hidden matzah, which was found just before midnight. Muriel realized that in all the excitement they had forgotten to open the door for Elijah. But when she looked at his cup, there was not a drop of wine in it. Now she knew who the mysterious stranger was. And this is the endnote, which my editor had to tell me to make shorter because I just wanted to tell you so much about the research and more endnote and acknowledgments, which include several people in this room, to whom I'm grateful to all of you. And go back in. What? Oh, right. So the what?
It's mirror.
Yeah. So the cat. All right, so Sean and I do this very clever thing where we interview each other with questions that our poor family members have heard the answers to 1,000,000 times, and we apologize. Could probably answer the questions themselves at this point, but we have a couple of questions that are sort of our FAQs that we get the ball rolling with, and then we open it up to everybody else.
These are the warm-up questions.
This is the warm-up question. Yeah.
So we've never met before.
We've never met. This is our first time.
Just tell a story about how you were sort of told not to really talk to me, and then kind of.
That's a good one. Yeah, right. So, right. It wasn't Sean in particular. It wasn't like there was something wrong with you. It was so generally. So you get asked a lot when someone has a picture book they've written, and a lot of people have picture books they've written because they're short and they look easy. Although this book took, I don't know, over 40 drafts, and maybe 50. I've kind of lost count. So when someone's written a picture book, they'll often ask, how do I get the artist? Do I go out and find them? Do I advertise for them? Where do I have to pay them? Where do I get them? And
classified.
Craigslist. Yeah.
definitely
That's
Craigslist.
very useful for that these days. Facebook Marketplace.
Facebook Marketplace. Yeah, clever. Yeah, good idea. So the answer is that you don't get the artist. You get the editor. You get an agent. The agent gets the. Oh, Amy, hi. This is a really fun day. Sorry, I really can't emphasize that enough. Okay, so you get a. You don't get a. You don't go out and hire the artist. You get an agent. The agent gets you an editor. This is assuming it all works out. And then the editor picks the artist. The editor and the art director come up with the art, find the artist for you. And then so they make the shidduch, they put you together, and then you don't really talk to the artist, like at all. And the reason is, and I come from a theater background, so I always explain it in theater terms. And so let's say there was a play going on, right? And I'm the playwright, and the director's over here, and I walk past the director, and I walk over to the set designer, and I say to the set designer, I hate that door you have there on the set. It looks ugly and terrible, and take it out. And so the set designer says, sure, whatever you want, you're the playwright. And in the second act, the actors can't come through the door because I didn't consider the whole picture, and I didn't consider what was happening in the second act. So what I need to do as a playwright is go to the director, who can say, and I say, I hate the door, and directors can say, okay, well, we can change the door, we can work with the door, we can make it better, but we have to have a door there because here's what's happening in the second act that you are not aware of. And it's the same thing here. I can't go right to the illustrator and say, take that out, because the editor is looking at the picture. I did. And I shouldn't. And so this is where the editor came in and said, talk to me, and we'll work it together. So what the editor kept telling me is, he said, I've always been told to keep the author and the illustrator as far apart as possible. However, I understand that that's not always possible. And so, for example, in this book, where you live, Susan, you live in Washington, D.C., I put you together with this illustrator. I had Sean visit you in Washington, D.C. for you to show in D.C. So I appreciate that you can't always be apart. Just involve me in your conversation, which we did not always do. And
So in one case, there was a thing where I actually made a significant sort of error, and you identified it, and we already fixed it, and then we went, it's being recorded. It's like, okay, I'm gonna write an email, and I'm gonna tell you to fix it, and you're just gonna have it. So anyway.
so the
It's
truth
a
is,
paper trail. Like, it was a good paper trail. It's like the fact the problem had already been solved. Yeah.
so the truth is, in this particular case, we got to know each other very well, and we did work together, but we also didn't, whenever it became like a big thing, we did go through the editor. So like there was a time when the book got delayed, and Sean didn't just text me and say, hey, the book got delayed. It came through the editor and the agent.
Yeah.
So it did go above board. But when it was just like, hey, what do you think about this little thing? Then, we got a little more casual. But we did get to know each other very well, which is extremely unusual. The fact that, like, we know each other before this event today, that's crazy. I mean, I know people, I met someone once who'd done 5 books with an illustrator and never met them.
Yeah.
In person.
Yeah.
And that's not unusual. So the fact that we have met, and we met beforehand because we met, I took Sean around DC, as I mentioned, and so we just got to know each other. And I think the book turned out better. I think it did.
Well, it's more common for me to ask you a question about how something should look, or what you thought about something, or if you had some sort of resource that I could use, and then not show Susan what I was doing with it.
Yeah, so I didn't see the book.
Yeah.
I just answered the questions.
Yeah. So we had a whole thing about hats, for example.
So much about hats.
Yeah.
We hats and food.
Yeah.
We talked about food. So our editor thought we were having these deep discussions. Really, we talked about food 90%.
And that hasn't changed.
No, that hasn't changed. We're still talking about food.
I bet if we opened up the questions now, we could get a bunch.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
Yeah. Do you have?
Yeah.
I have a question.
I know you would.
I'm so happy that Sean is here because I actually want. I mean, I love your book, Susan, but I
really want to talk to Sean.
The art is beautiful. When I saw your online interview where I think you were going live, I was like, wow, you were talking about art at the same time, and I thought, oh my God, there's so many questions I want to ask. So just now, when you were holding up the book, I noticed that like each page had a color theme. It was pink, and then brown, and then blue and green. Did you sort of storyboard all that out ahead of time and look at all the different colors? Did you plan that, or did it just come together that way?
Yes, it's a great question. It's considered pretty good practice to do like a color story when you're dealing with anything like this. Animated movies, for example, like very big on that. If you ever like pick up an art Pixar book, particular movie, there's almost always some spreads with the color story. And I don't know if this was sort of like super. It was super formal in this case, but keeping track of what colors are happening when, and particularly so you don't have like things reoccurring in the wrong places. And also, I think in this case there was a there's a sensibility that we were going for in this book where it's going to go from day to night, of course, because sundown is when the Jewish holiday starts. So as things progress further, it becomes, there's like, it goes to dusk, and then it goes to sort of full night, and then I think the last like 2 spreads or so is like it's really like deep blues. And that's where there's like no sunlight whatsoever. So yeah, that's all very intentional. And I actually really like doing that. I've done it in another book, and there's there's a book I'm fiddling with right now that has a sort of a similar idea where you're trying to show time elapsing during a day. So it just works really well for this because I think sometimes like you can just use it to create a little bit more visual interest, but it's an active part of the story here. It has to happen. You have to go from day to night, or else the whole thing doesn't make sense. Yeah. Thanks.
Answer.
Why do you have so many landmarks from DC in the book?
It's like you saw my question. This is my nephew. So why do I have so many landmarks from DC? So I got really, so there's a big reason and a little reason. So the big reason is that a lot of Jewish books are all set in the same places. So they're all set in New York, and they're all set in Poland or Russia, like a long time ago, and they're not set. There's no diversity of place, and so I really wanted I wanted a fresh setting, and I really love Washington. So as Lisa knows, I grew up in Washington, D.C. area, my whole life, and I love Washington. I think Washington is so cool. There's cherry blossoms. Those buildings are amazing. Washington is different and interesting and unusual. And this is the first Jewish children's picture book about Washington, D.C. Wow. It's the only one. And I really wanted Washington, and I went back and forth with our editor a bunch. He didn't quite see D.C. and he thought that it was a little bit of a cop-out because I lived here, and I said, and so finally I took him on this trip, this 4-mile trip that you see in the book where the girl walks from the Lincoln Memorial to the 6th and I, and then he was like, oh, okay, Washington, gotta be Washington. And so the big reason is I wanted it set here because Washington has this great Jewish community that's never written about. And then I wanted, once we discovered it was set in Washington, I wanted you to open up the book and see Washington. I wanted you to see the cherry blossoms. I wanted you to see 6th and I. I wanted you to see the White House. I wanted you to see the Washington Monument. I wanted you to see Washington. And then I did this really sneaky thing that you do when you're a writer and you can't control the book, which is you put it in the book. So it says, she walked past the blossoms, she walked past the White House, she walked past the Washington Monument, walked past Lincoln Memorial. And so like I forced the artist
Spreads to be taken out.
that he had to draw those. He couldn't cut them because it said so in the text. So I made it, and now when people open up the book, they're like, hey, look, it's 6 and I. And I wanted that in there. I want you to open it up and see the cherry blossoms and say, this is DC. Cool. It's on me. This is fun. I know everybody's name.
I read this to my kindergarten students this week while because we're studying the
Did you read
holidays.
it to your students?
Yes, I did. And their question to me, so I'm going to relay their question, was,
I'll put
where
my
was
class, by the way.
Muriel coming from?
Where's
They
Muriel?
want to know, did she have a job? Was she at school? They
I
wanted
have
to
an
know where
answer.
Muriel was coming from.
Okay, I have an answer. And first off, I'll totally come to school.
Oh, cool.
Like next
Okay.
year.
Yeah.
Be professor. So I got obsessed with the backstory, and I researched it to death. She's coming from Rock Creek Park,
Okay.
and I had this whole thing, and I found this picture of Eleanor Roosevelt riding in Rock Creek Park, and I showed my editor, and he's like, "Oh, come on, like you can't have Eleanor Roosevelt, like that's like too much." But yeah, but like, and I'm like, but then she was riding on that day in Rock Creek Park. See, look. And I'm like, so I had a map of where she was coming from exactly, and I thought actually that was going to be the end papers, but I have no control over that. But yeah, she was coming from Rock Creek Park, and she was walking home through Rock Creek Park past the Lincoln Memorial. I love that your students asked that.
Yeah.
Okay, Russ, my brother.
Well, this.
Are you really asking me a question?
I really am. This got released, obviously, over a year ago.
You were there.
I know. I'm setting the context of my question. And we're doing this now a little bit later. What has been your experience with having this book and going through Passover? And what does it mean going into Passover in the next week?
Were you at the Passover Seder?
I'm curious.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did you say, Joe?
I said it's called a softball. He's giving you a
Oh,
lot.
okay, we say it's called softball. See, when you have like cousins, brothers, parents. Okay, that was called a softball. Yeah. It's a matzo ball.
Hopefully that's all.
Fluffy.
Are they soft matzo balls? Or they like? Yeah. Actually, that's a good question. And we had, as I believe you know, a guest last year at our Passover Seder. You were at it, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We were.
No one else was.
Okay, so actually Passover was kind of crazy last year, and this year, like what I didn't. So Passover has always been my favorite holiday. Do I have to tell the story? Well, my husband's in the room. And
You
actually,
have been
Lisa's in
set
the
up
room.
now.
What?
Oh,
This is in the room.
story.
What'd you say?
You have been set up so hard. Tell the story already.
Well, don't think I've ever told the story with Ken in the room. Ken, come up and tell the story.
No, come on, just tell the story. Come on, tell the story.
Alex, do you want to tell the story?
No, I missed last year. Tell the story.
The last year's story or the other story? Okay, the last year's story.
Tell the story that Russ asked about what last
Okay.
year at Passover felt like. This is important.
Okay,
Come on.
the last year's story is that, so when you write a holiday book, I didn't really think about this. When you write a holiday book, suddenly that holiday becomes very different for you. Because now that, like, there's just all these events, right? Like, this is the second event today. And then I have more events coming up this week. There were events last week. It's great. It's fantastic. I'm so thrilled. But it's like Passover is now my busy season. Like everybody wants me on Passover. Last Passover, the Sunday before Passover, I had 4 events on one day. And so it's changed the holiday. It's not a bad thing. It's just a different thing. The holiday is now doing this, which is great. But this is part of it now. And so last year was really cool because it just felt like we were talking about it, and we finally had the Seder, and now we were doing it, and it was just such a different thing. And then so last year we had a Seder that was in person for the first time in a little while, but then we also had a virtual Seder, so it was like half virtual Seder and half in person. Oh, Alex, you were there, weren't you?
I can't keep track of which Seder has been during pandemic which, so I don't remember last year.
Okay,
I don't know.
Alex has been to most Seders.
Yeah.
Okay, and but last year was a half. The computer was kind of on the Seder tape, and because it was virtual, we invited my editor, and we decided to do this new tradition of reading the book during the Seder, which is very unusual. And I invited my editor, who was zooming in from New York, to read the book. And so he read the book. You were there, right?
Yes, now I remember. Yep,
Okay,
keep going.
all right. So he read the book, and what's cool is in the book, Sean did this cameo, and the rabbi is my editor.
Oh.
And so he was unconsciously making the same expressions that the rabbi makes. And the screenshots are really cool because he's doing this and the rabbi's doing this. So that was really cool. It was a powerful moment to hear him read it at our Passover Seder.
And when did he figure out that he was in the book?
He figured it out. So I go to this writer's retreat, which is the Highlights Foundation by the people who do Highlights magazine, and I was there this summer, and Neil came up to visit, and we were sitting out on the back porch, and we were talking about the book, and I had the book open, and I pointed to the rabbi, and Neil looked at it really carefully, and he said, "Wait, is that me?" and I said, "Yeah," and he said, and then he looked back at me, and he said, "How many hundreds of times have I looked at this artwork?" I said, did you not know? He said, "I had no idea." And then we walked, and he was so thrilled about it, and we walked around highlights, and there were other people he knew. And every time we saw anybody, he said, Susan, show them the book." It was really adorable. So.
I called the art director, Jennifer Brown, great art director, literally one of the best in the business, and asked her, "Is this cool? Like, how would you react to it?" Because I'm not going to tell him when he finally figured it out. It's actually kind of common. People put them in a lot of books, and in fact, I found out later, not only books, but I know some people, it's like shorthand for an editor. In publishing, if you want to draw an editor, some people just draw Neil. So like he pops up in all sorts of stuff.
Comic strips and the New Yorker.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's just sort of.
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah, he is caricatured lovingly because he's sort of in a way shorthand for the classical.
The quintessential editor.
Yeah, New York editor. Yeah.
What's funny is when he figured it out, and I told him, I said, "Well, Jennifer, your art director, I said, Jennifer knows." He's like, "Wait, do you mean everybody but me knows?" And I said, "Yeah, everybody but you." Daniel.
I heard you mention that Passover is your favorite holiday, but is there a reason why Passover?
Well, now you're really setting me up. Actually, it has partly to do with this woman right in front of you. So several years ago, I was home from college, and I had invited a couple of friends over that I hadn't seen in a long time, including Lisa and her daughter Carmen, to our Seder. It was my last semester of college, and I had invited them, and Lisa couldn't come, and Carmen, like maybe an hour before the Seder, called and said, "I'm really sorry I can't come, but I have this friend over, and he's helping me move houses. I helped him move apartments, and I'm so sorry." And Passover, as you know, is all about welcoming people in, inviting a stranger, all who are hungry, come and eat, all of that. And so Carmen said, "I can't come because I have a friend over." And I said, "Well, just bring the friend." And so she did. And I really liked the friend, and he really liked me. And then we started dating. And then 3 years to the day after we started dating, we had at my parents' house again, at Passover Seder, on our 3-year anniversary, and he said, "How is tonight different?" Or I said, "How is tonight different from all the nights?" And Ken said, "Because I'm asking you to be my wife." And that's how Ken and I got engaged. I was the youngest person at that Seder. Yes.
Why was the cat blue?
You're gonna have to ask your dad.
There are my son Sammy.
A plant.
Yes, a plant. The cat is blue. Why do you think the cat is blue? I was curious if you have any theories. No, okay. I think the cat is mostly blue because Marc Chagall painted some blue cats. Also because cats aren't usually blue. If you have a blue cat, the cat looks sort of magical and a little surreal. So when the blue cat first starts to show up, when just a little bit before the magician comes back to Muriel's house, and kind of sort of an association between the cat and the magician. It's not like they're like one is the other or anything. It's just that it's sort of a hint that things are starting to go a little bit in sort of a supernatural direction. That's what I said.
Tammy.
Tell us about the red beret.
The red beret. We would love to tell you about the red beret. Denise, do you want to tell us about the red beret?
No, yeah, I can do that. Why isn't it blue? Actually, there was so much blue in the book at one point. Neil called me up and said, "Sean, what's with all this blue?" So we had to take some of the blue out. But I was working on a different job at the same time, and we were playing with a lot of different shades of blue. And so I found that one of the shades of blue that I was doing for one of those projects wound up going into the book over and over and over again. It was very specific, but there you have it. This red beret, this is very similar to another red beret that belonged to my Aunt Grace. My mother actually knitted it for her. That was a rabbit fur one, right? Angora. Yeah, which is the only thing I'm allergic to. Very fancy rabbits. Anyway, when I was trying to figure out what to, how to make Muriel stand out of it, I did another book where there's a girl in a yellow sweater, and so she always sort of stands out. I was just thinking of something that I thought was kind of believably 1930s, and you know, sort of, I was thinking about my great aunt who lived through that period, and I thought, oh, you know, a red beret would kind of make sense. It's the sort of thing that you can imagine a kid wearing if they didn't have a lot of money, but it would still kind of make her maybe, you know, feel happy and kind of, yeah, it's kind of a happy color. And there's also not much red elsewhere in the book. That's important. So if you want the character to pop out, it would be a color that's not going to be occurring in a lot of different places. That's how that wound up like that.
Yeah, and so we just did an event at another bookstore a few weeks ago, and Denise, Sean's mom, gave me this red beret. So this is brand new, and she just made it. And what I have thought is really cool is, so I didn't know about the red beret until after the book came out, and the connection to Sean and his great aunt. But the character is named Muriel, which is my grandmother's name. So this character has something from my family and something from his family, and it ends up being a really special character for both of us. And we didn't, either of us, of all the things we talked about, we never talked about that until the book came out. So it was kind of fun.
So who made that?
This is made by my friend Patty Portilla, and she did this amazing job. Yeah, she crocheted.
There you go.
Andrew,
Why did you choose it to be in the Great Depression?
why did I choose it? So it was actually our editor. He thought that so the book was originally set in what we call shtetl, which is very Fiddler on the Roof, a long time ago in Poland. That's where Isle Parrot set it, and when I moved it, our editor Neil Porter thought that the family had to be there. First off, there was no kid in it at all. I added the child and many other things, and so Neil thought it had to be a really poor family, and he thought by setting it during the Depression explained that was why they were so poor, because the poor was important to the story. And I didn't like the Depression, and I argued with him like several times, and finally I was like, okay, fine, the Depression, and he's like, great idea, the Depression. And it ended up, and then as I said before, he didn't love DC, so I didn't love the Depression, he didn't love DC, and like that was the compromise where I came around on the Depression, he came around on DC, and it was DC versus Depression, and I think both of them worked together. So, but it was both of our ideas, basically, and that's what, you know, working with someone like that. Is that it? Dad?
What are you gonna do next?
Dad, that's the first question.
How are you gonna top this thing?
All right. Well, Sean has books under contract. He has a good answer to that.
I think I get it downstairs.
Oh, are they not now? Oh, okay. Sean can't answer that question. Well, I know what they are.
I can't imagine how.
Oh no, we never talked, right? Yeah, and I'm working on a bunch of things, and you know, publishing is really bizarre, right? Because like you can't talk about anything for years until it's like signed and then announced, and then you're not allowed to shut up about it until you bore everybody around you with it, and so they're like enough, and then you can't talk about it while you're working on the next thing. So I'm working on some things that I can't talk about. Michael, you had a question.
Do you have the whole book memorized?
like so close. I mean, because I've been reading it a lot, and it's weird because I mean, I read a lot of other picture books, right, as a librarian, and I have those memorized, and books I've read to my kids. I have trouble memorizing this book because there were so many dozens of drafts that I don't always remember, like that last line, if there were 40 drafts, there were 40 versions of that last line. And I don't remember what the heck the line is because every time it was different. And like we struggled so much getting that line just, it was so important. And it was to get it just right. And I never remember what the heck we picked. And so every time I'm like, what is the line? So while I can remember like Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, is there enough room? I can't remember this book as well. It's ironic, isn't it? Marcy.
Okay, actually, a question related to the previous question, which is, you struck gold here with Sydney Taylor, and you're working.
Oh, to my dad's question.
Right, and you're working at the temple, and so is your thinking that you will continue to follow Jewish subjects, or are you sort of looking
Yeah, well, I'm working
for something completely different?
Yeah, so so Rebecca can answer this question for me.
Oh, always Jewish books.
Always Jewish books. So I'm working on 4 books right now. They're all people talk about being typecast, but like I want to be typecast, and I want to. Well, as Rebecca knows, like there are the kinds of Jewish stories that we're not seeing told, and I want to tell them. And so, I mean, there are a lot. I don't want to be presumptuous and say, like, you know, nothing's being told. But there's a kind of story that I want to see out there. And some of the way to see that out there is to tell it yourself. Wouldn't you say, Rebecca? I'm putting her on the spot, but we talk about this literally every day.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And yeah, so I tried to write a book that wasn't Jewish. And when I submitted it, he said, no, I want another Jewish book. And I was really surprised by that because I was trying to not be typecast. And I was thrilled when he said that. And I was like, wait, you mean I can just write Jewish books? And so I think it takes a little more chutzpah, but that's what I want to do.
Did you mention the award?
No, I'm not very good at that. Rebecca's gonna come up and be my spokesman, right?
You want me to just come up?
Yeah. Come on.
All right.
All right. For you.
This book is the recipient of the 2022 Sydney Taylor Award for picture book. It is of literary merit that authentically portrays the Jewish experience. This was chosen by her peers at the Association of Jewish Libraries, who are on the Sydney Taylor Committee. They had a lot of books to pick through, and this truly rose to the top.
That is what like me, Rebecca is a former chair.
Sure. Yeah. Susan, what is your favorite illustration and why? And then Sean, what's your favorite piece of writing in the book and why?
What is my favorite illustration? That's like kind of a loaded question.
I didn't ask about least favorite, so.
What?
I didn't ask about least favorite, so.
Oh, least favorite. He knows which is my least favorite. It's funny because my least favorite one is his most favorite.
Which one is that?
Yeah,
Don't worry about that.
That's the least versus favorite.
Sean loves it, and we have differing opinions. Most favorite.
Can we guess?
I love so many of them. This is so mean.
It's either the juggler or the synagogue windows.
I love the synagogue windows because I love so many of them. I love Lincoln. I love Lincoln. I love the creativity of this. That I love that there are 5 scenes here, and I think that is brilliant. And I love the way Six and I is portrayed, and I love the action happening in each. To me, like, you know, when I was on the Caltech committee, this is a page that would have drawn me in, and I would have said, oh, wow.
They wanted panels actually. Say I do comics, and so I think one of the thoughts bringing me into this project was that it's the 30s comics. There's actually a very strong connection there in that decade, also especially the Jewish creators. And then I just proceeded to deliver something that had nothing to do with comics whatsoever, which was fine from the editor and from Neil and Jennifer's perspective, but at the same time, they felt that the only way that we were going to be able to get through that one section where there was a sequence of events that happened very quickly to get the protagonist from one location to a second location and then back to the previous location, you had to do something sequential. I just didn't want to do panels. I don't know why. You get these like ideas in your head. I'm not doing panels on this book, no way. So the solution was to do something that was actually rooted in the architecture of the synagogue by doing those arches, which I think was kind of it worked because it put it back into place. And the concern that we all had putting the book together is that it had to be obviously Washington. We were trying to find things in the neighborhood and in the environment that were kind of that we could actually use when we were telling a story. So that was an example of that. My favorite piece of writing was taken out of the final draft.
Taken out of the final
Yeah,
draft?
it was a bit about black magic having no substance.
Oh my God!
And then I was like, well, can I get an epigram or something? Like, no. I'm like, all right. But I really liked that. That was actually one of the things that really pulled me into the book when I read it. It was a manuscript.
Oh no! We argued over that
I know,
more than anything else in the book. So many conversations in Neil's office. We brought in 3 rabbis because Neil was not happy with the where we're going, and so the 3 Marcy and Michael know the 3 rabbis at Temple of Shalom. They all, Amy and Stephanie and Jeff were all in the conference room debating that one line, and then I tape recorded them, and I took that tape recording to Neil's office, and I pressed play, and he's like, oh my God, they're all arguing in my office over that one line about the black magic. And to the point when finally Neil and I were like, we have to take it out. I mean, we argued more over that line than anything in the book. I mean, for like years.
Really good. That being said,
It was such a relief to take it out.
I went looking for it later. I'm like, what happened?
You were not at the baked in with the rabbi.
I really like.
What was the line? Oh, it's a line from the original book. It's something like, it's in the first 30 drafts. It's something like, magic has no substance, and so if you can, it got cut from half of the line got cut. So black magic has no substance. So if you can pour the wine and break the matzah, then this is real. But because of so then we had this whole debate of the Jewish viewpoint of magic, and whoa, we went so deep, and I researched it, and the rabbis argued, and it's gone. It's never coming back. Alex.
This is not a question, this is a comment though, but if you actually had 3 rabbis arguing over the fundamentals of your book, I think you really succeeded on writing a Jewish book. I think you
3 rabbis, 4 opinions.
Right, deserve every moment of that award. Really, I mean, not just on literary merits, but on the not liturgical, on the theological merits.
Well, I actually think that moment, along with walking through DC with me, that the moment of the rabbis arguing in his office was Neil's favorite moment of the book. He found that to be the coolest thing, that the rabbis were going, and these 3 rabbis are all really cool in their own way, and they all have their own very, very distinct personalities. And as he was listening, he's like, oh, that woman has a lot to say. And I said, said, "Oh, you should meet her." But he really picked up on Amy. I thought that was funny. Anyway, so it was, yeah. And actually, there were 4 rabbis total because the 4th rabbi, Rabbi Berkowitz, translated word for word every word of the Yiddish story for me for hours. And that was so there are actually 4 rabbis thanked in the back of the book. He passed away a week before the book came out. And it was, and the first book maybe the second book I sent was to his daughter. But he is it actually doesn't say ZL because I didn't know when I wrote the acknowledgments, he hadn't died.
Right. Yeah.
So it actually just says his name. I'll have to change that in the.
So a more direct way of answering that question would be the description of the food. And in particular, I mean, there are like the whole issue of we can't put in illustrator notes. I telling the illustrator what to do. So we'll just write something specific enough that it winds up being an
I was
illustrator
told you
note
should
anyway.
never put illustrator notes.
Yeah. But this also became a conversation when we were doing it because we was concerned that the brisket was not sort of mountainous enough. The matzo ball soup was not oceanic enough, etc.
And that one line
Yeah.
was written on a bus on a Association of Jewish Libraries tour to the Eric Carr Museum and the Yiddish Book Center, and my friend Kathy Bloomfield helped write that one line. So you need to blame her.
It clearly hadn't eaten anything that day.
No, I wouldn't. She hadn't. No.
Maybe one bagel. No, so yeah. At any rate, but it really did actually create opportunities. This is kind of funny. I love Ashkenazi food like a lot. And if you're familiar with my work, you know that because there's running bits in my other work about corned beef and stuff. So like brisket keeps on coming up in my books. But the prior book I did, Bolivar, there was actually an issue with making brisket look like something. My wife, Lucy, had a huge influence on me. It was like, you can't, like it was just, it's a sandwich, and it didn't look quite right, and so what we did was just push it all the way to the end of the book and made it look really big so it was a gag. Because otherwise it just had, it sort of died on the page, the best way to put it. It didn't really work as an illustration. And so really making sure that that the food looked like the food, and getting away from it just being sort of, very brown. I mean, the brisket's going to be brown. The matzo ball is sort of like ivory color. They may not necessarily pop unless they're drawn or colored a certain way. And so the fact that they were mountains, and then it became, okay, well, mountains of meat, what's that going to be like? That has to kind of, and so we wound up, putting some parsley in just to kind of give a little bit extra color. But this was like the second or third version of the spread. And I don't just sketch it. We actually had started coloring our versions of the spread. And then Neil and Jennifer and I threw them over our shoulders, and that's not working.
I swear we had many conversations where I thought the most significant contribution I made to this book was whether or not there were going to be carrots on the spread. And I thought I said yes, and there were no carrots.
Yeah, they're in the
Oh, no, on the brisket, there was what is it going to be?
The simmis, yeah, I got rid of that because it was not
back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth.
It wasn't reading. We were going to do simmis. It didn't work, so the carrots.
I thought I said yes, and I had influenced the drawings in some ways, but no, not at all. That was it.
The other problem was how to draw a harosa so that was actually understandable.
The harotsi, we went, that actually was a big conversation.
Yeah, because it didn't look enough.
We had this huge conversation with, at the end, like the final artwork with me and Neil and Jennifer and Sean about lumpy harotsis and making the harotsis lumpier. And Sean made the harotsis lumpier, and then we all said, no, not lumpy enough. And then we went back and forth about lumpier harotsis. It was like a crazy conversation we were having, Mom.
And then there was also a conversation whether or not to put the lettuce on the potato plate, right?
Oh, the lettuce. Actually, what was crazy was apparently I never really realized. Okay, there's an order of which the things go on the Seder plate, and so everybody kept telling me put them in this order, and I wasn't putting them in the order. I was researching, so I researched. Well, it's a Jewish thing. There are 97 different orders. Every time
I'm
you look
shocked.
it, shocking. So every time you look it up, it's like put it this way, put it this way, put it this way, put it this way, and then everyone's like, it's this. So I had one sensitivity reader who said it's absolutely this way, and I'm like, okay, fine, and then no wait, it's absolutely this way, it's absolutely that way, it's absolutely this way. I was like, I can't even care anymore. Just throw the things on the table.
Well, this would be the order I definitely grew up with, but more
I
importantly,
think that was one of the orders.
this was the approved order from the TJ Library material that were released last year.
Mom, you have a burning question?
I have a burning question. I think, so I've been to several of these presentations.
Oh, these presentations.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And
You have a question above that?
yes,
Okay.
I would love for the two of you to ask the audience, what was brand new for them? Because I think a lot of people don't know what goes on in publishing or what,
Oh, yeah.
researching so many things, 3, 4 rabbis arguing.
Well, I don't think that's usual in publishing.
I know. I think it happens in every book 4 rabbis have. Anyway, I would love for you to
Axel wasn't arguing with Amy.
I would love for you to ask people what is new for them about this book or book making.
Okay, so my mom wants to know what was new for you.
What are you going to
Tammy.
remember?
Oh, yeah. For me, it was finding out that usually the author and illustrator don't discuss. Like, you don't tell him what your vision is for a page, which actually makes a lot of sense because, I mean, as I'm more of a writer than an artist in my life, and I can see why, having worked with artists in, just in advertising and stuff like that, they always have a better idea than anything I came up with. So it's cool that they kind of enforce that. So I had a question for you, and that is, how do you decide what medium to use?
Oh, it's actually on our list. And I will say, Tammy, that's what almost everybody thinks is new. Like, nobody knows that. It's like the big hidden secret of picture book publishing.
It's if I could just sort of talk about that for just a moment. So I write my own books and I illustrate them. And one of the funny things for me is that when I finish a manuscript and if it's approved or whatever, and I want to wind up illustrating it completely, I always run into things that when I approach it as an illustrator, I go, no, I don't know what that guy was thinking. So it's sort of like chronological collaboration, where I'm always collaborating with like the past version of myself. But there's this weird dynamic where, I think I told you that too. It's not like, I'm a writer, and I'm always kind of finding things that I just, as a writer, may not 100% sort of foresee that I will see as an illustrator. So it is, that is, I mean, it's a fair point. I understand that myself. Medium, most of the things I do are basically the same shtick, which is to do graphite drawings using, I actually have pencils in my pocket, I don't know why. Usually these are just Statler HB pencils. I used to use a lot of mechanical pencils actually, and this is one of the first books I transitioned out of that because it just was, mechanical pencils have a very dead line, and with this, depending on the way it's going, movement, you get a different kind of width on the edge and a little bit more attitude, so that was fun. That'll be on a piece of bristle board, which if you don't know, is pretty thick, usually pretty smooth paper, white. And then that's scanned into the computer with a large document scanner. Things of a behemoth. At this point, there's no place to put it, so it was on the floor. Got to do something about that. It's like 11 by 17, and in this case, these were typically like 24 by something. So they had to be scanned in 2 places and then stitched together, which is very annoying if you crosshatch. Clearly, this whole process was not thought about completely, like from the ground up. And then once the drawing, which again is just going to be a black and white pencil drawing, is in the computer, I start coloring it. Although you don't color it immediately because there's always stuff going on. You get smudges, you get little particles. Certain parts are sort of darker than others for various reasons. So there's a whole process of actually cleaning and equalizing an image before you even color it, which is actually very time consuming. And then you start to color. And that's just using Photoshop. I say just using Photoshop. But if familiar with sort of old style multi-phase printing, or multi-part printing, I should say, what they would do is, you know, you'd get like say comics or something from the mid 20th century. You do the black and white drawing, and then they would probably do something with watercolor. It would be the picture, and they do lithography of the black and the color separately. So it's kind of what I'm doing on the computer, except it's just kind of building the whole thing together. So there will be the black and white layer. If you use Photoshop, that's on multiply, so it's sort of darker than everything else, but it's also, the white is just invisible. So everything underneath that is going to be color. And so you can just build layers underneath the pencil drawing, and then sometimes on top, but mostly just underneath the pencil drawing in order to kind of get the color down. And that's usually a combination of digital watercolor and digital pastel at this point. Yeah, and it only takes, I don't know, how long do you think a given illustration takes me at this point? I've done very good at being able to tell.
It's like a week for illustration.
Yeah, probably better than for illustration. Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes they take less, sometimes they take more. But yeah.
Thank you.
You said you started it so big. Why do you have to start it so big? I don't understand why
It's
you
just
would
small
draw
little
small.
details. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, so it's like this tiny little, and so if you made it smaller, you wouldn't be able to see.
So people do in the reverse. Brian Selznick, for example, he actually.
I know,
blows
Brian
things up.
Selznick
Yeah.
makes them,
Yeah.
Brian Selznick does it wacky, because he does it this little, and he uses like projectors to make it bigger. But those drawings for like Hugo Cabaret are actually like this big,
Yeah, and then he blows them up.
and then he goes
Yeah.
up.
Which there's, you could get
He draws
yeah,
like this.
stuff from doing that too. But I do it big because it's kind of easier to move around physically in a big piece of paper, and then also I have to really, now at this point, they've been making bigger and bigger graphics tablets for actually, so I don't like color with the mouse. I used to, but I have a stylus and it goes right on the computer screen. A company called Wacom makes them. And the biggest one they made for years was 24 inches diagonal, and now they're 32, which is almost exactly the same width as a piece of paper I'm using. So it's also kind of better for my eyes, I think. But if you're doing little stuff, it's kind of funny. I used to really do that when I was younger. It was like these very, very minute movements. And once I started doing more oil painting when I was in my 20s, which I don't really do very much at all now, so you can get bigger gestures in using the rest of your arm. And so that definitely happens now when I'm working on a bigger piece of paper. Like the biggest oil paintings I did when I was in school, like 6.5 by 6.5 feet. And that really got me interested in making working hard and hard. Again, I used to look really small. So that whole ability to do that, then you just shrink it down a bit. I don't know. I'm always fighting with lines going dead. This is all like kind of technical weird stuff, but it's just, I think there's a real temptation when you're drawing, if you're like tracing sketches, things can seem really kind of like, they're not spontaneous enough. And if something isn't spontaneous enough, it just isn't interesting. The fact that the lines, even if you know where they're going, look like you didn't know they were going to get there until they were there. There's something that happens on the paper, but I think if you're looking at the art, you know, you respond to it a certain way. So, for example, a lot of people like to trace over their sketches or like to project them. I just redraw them, and I've been using grids a little bit more lately, but I don't even always use grids to do like one-to-one, because I'm always trying to make something look like it was, you know, what am I trying to say? I always try to make something look like it actually was the original, and not just something that's a copy of a copy of a copy in a way that kind of makes it look less spontaneous and unique. Yeah.
Lulu, do we need to wrap up?
Yeah, if that's okay with you, I will just make sure everybody has time to get their book signed. So,
Yeah, and then if you already have a book, which I think a lot of you do, so you can just join us at Yellow Bistro, which is all the way across the street.
literally right across, amazing place. You guys are having a great time. Thank you both so much for being here, for writing the book. Biggest event we've had in the store since we reopened to events, so you all deserve a badge for that.
And I think that the book has sold one of the best.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. I have to look at the details, but this is easily one of our like top 5 books that we've sold in the last year. So and you all helped make that happen too. So if you don't mind, just when you get up at half of you can decide amongst yourself, just close your little chair and lean it against one of the bookshelves or hand it to me, and then I'll get that out of your way so we can, whoever does have a book already can just stand up right and get in line here for some books and if you need more fun, there's plenty up at the front.
I want to look at books because I've been staring at books for like an hour.
Sicker in the head, tell Dad.
Everybody across the street.
Yeah.
I've been hearing about this conversations with people who live there. I've been hearing a lot about this.
She had an online
Just gonna end that, y'all don't mind?